Today, we'll dive into a book that captures this raw, existential confrontation in Tolstoy's signature, poignant style. The Death of Ivan Ilyich by Leo Tolstoy is a profound exploration of mortality and the meaning of life. It tells the story of a man who has lived his life chasing superficial accomplishments and societal approval. Ivan Ilyich has lived a life that, on the surface, seems respectable and successful, but in reality is devoid of true substance and connection. When he is confronted with a terminal illness, the illusion of his invincibility shatters. He's forced to grapple with the inevitability of his own death, a truth he had spent a lifetime avoiding. What follows is a powerful and tragic narrative about grief, death, and dying. Ivan begins to grieve for himself, for the life he is losing, but more importantly, for the life he realizes he never truly lived. As he reflects on his choices, he starts to question whether the path he took, marked by ambition and materialism, was worth it. It's a deeply moving meditation on how we spend our time and what we leave behind. Now, here's where the contrast with the Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka becomes particularly striking. While Kafka's story plunges us into the existential dread of a life that suddenly loses its purpose through Gregor Samsa's dehumanizing transformation, the Death of Ivan Ilyich focuses on the yearning for life once the realization of mortality sets in. Both protagonists face an impending end, Gregor through his transformation into something unrecognizable, Ivan through the undeniable reality of death. But while Gregor is consumed by alienation and futility, Ivan experiences a profound shift. His journey forces him to confront his regrets and ponder what truly matters: love, connection, and authenticity. If the Metamorphosis is a portrait of existential despair, the Death of Ivan Ilyich offers a somber yet illuminating lens on redemption and the possibility of finding meaning even in our final moments. Tolstoy's novella is essential reading for anyone reflecting on how to live intentionally, especially when paired with Kafka's masterpiece. Together, they form a compelling dialogue about the human condition, one rooted in despair, the other in an aching, late-blooming hope. This book is short, searing, and so impactful that it will stay with you long after you've turned the final page. Now, let's turn to Chapter 9, where Ivan is at a pivotal moment in his journey. This passage beautifully encapsulates the torment and transformation that defines the latter part of his life. It's a stark, sobering reflection on what happens when we realize that the clock has almost run out. His wife returned late that night. She came in on tiptoe, but he heard her, opened his eyes, and hastily shut them again. She wanted to send Gerasim out and sit with him herself. He opened his eyes and said, "No go. Are you suffering a lot?" "It doesn't matter. Take some opium." He consented and drank it. She went away. He was in an oppressive state of unconsciousness till 3 in the morning. It seemed to him that he and his pain were being painfully pushed into a long, narrow black sack, pushed in deeper and deeper, and yet could not be pushed right through. And this terrible business is agonizing for him. He is both afraid and wants to fall through. He struggles against it, and he tries to help. And suddenly, he tore free and fell and came to himself. There is Gerasim, sitting as usual at the foot of the bed, dozing peacefully and patiently. And there he is, lying with his emaciated, stockinged feet resting on Gerasim's shoulders. There is the same shaded candle and the same interminable pain. "Go away, Gerasim," he whispered. "It doesn't matter. I'll sit a while. No, do go." He drew his legs down, lay sideways on his arm, and felt sorry for himself. He waited till Gerasim went next door, abandoned all restraint, and cried like a child. He was crying for his helplessness, his terrible loneliness, people's cruelty, God's cruelty, the absence of God. "Why have you done all this? Why did you bring me here? What have I done that you torment me so dreadfully?" He did not even expect an answer, and cried because there was no answer, and could be no answer. The pain rose up again, but he did not stir and did not call out. He said to himself, "Go on, batter me. But what for? What have I done to you? What is it for?" Then he grew quiet, stopped crying and even breathing, and grew all attention, as though he were listening not to a voice speaking in sounds, but the voice of his soul, the train of thoughts rising inside him. And in his imagination, he began going over the best moments of his pleasant life. But how strange all those best moments of his pleasant life now seemed quite different from what they had then seemed. Everything, except the first memories of his childhood. There, in his childhood, was something really pleasant that you could live with if it were to come again. But the person who had experienced that happy time was no more. It was like a memory of another person. As soon as those things began that resulted in Ivan Ilyich, the man he was now, so all those apparent joys melted away before his eyes, turning into something trivial and often bad. And the further he went from his childhood, the nearer he came to the present, the more trivial and dubious his pleasures became. It began with law school. There was still something genuinely good there. There was enjoyment, there was friendship, there were hopes. But in the final years, these good moments already grew rarer. Then, in his service at the governor's, good moments reappeared again. They were memories of love for women. Then it all became confused, and there was still less that was good. Further on, even less was good, and the further he went, the less good it became. Marriage. So accidental, and then disillusion, and the smell of his wife's breath, and the sensuality and hypocrisy, and that deathly job, and those anxieties about money, and 1 year like that, and 2, and 10, and 20, and all the same. And the further you went, the more deathly it became. Exactly as though I was steadily walking down a mountain and thinking I was climbing it. And so I was. In public opinion, I was climbing up, and at just the same rate life was slipping away from under me. It's all up now, time to die. So what is this? What is it for? It can't be. Surely it can't be that my life was so pointless, so wrong? And if it was that wrong and that pointless, then why die, and die in pain? Something's not right here. Maybe I didn't live as I should. Suddenly came into his head. But how could that be when I did everything as it should be done? He said to himself, immediately driving off this, the one solution to the whole riddle of life and death, as though it were utterly out of the question. Now, what do you want? To live? Live how? Live as you lived in court when the usher called. The court is in session. The court is coming. The judge is coming. He repeated to himself. Here he comes, the judge. But I'm not to blame. He cried out bitterly. What is my guilt? And he stopped crying and turning his face to the wall, started thinking about one thing and only one. What for? Why the misery? But however much he thought, he could not find an answer. And whenever the thought came to him, as it often did, that everything stemmed from his not living as he should have done, he immediately remembered all the propriety of his life and pushed away such a bizarre idea. And with that, Ivan takes us to the edge of what it means to truly live and to face the inevitable with a new understanding. Leo Tolstoy's The Death of Ivan Ilyich reminds us of something we often push to the back of our minds, our mortality. But it's not just a story about death, it's about life and the choices we make when we think we have all the time in the world. If this has resonated with you, perhaps it's time to ask the hard questions. What are we holding on to that doesn't serve us? What will we leave behind? And who will we become if we truly live with purpose? Thank you for spending your time here today. If you enjoyed this exploration of the death of Ivan Ilyich, Feel free to share your thoughts below what stood out to you most. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing for more reflections on stories that change the way we think about our lives. Until next time, take care, and remember time waits for no one. So make it count.